Hearing Zhuge Bai's words, Yun Chujiu couldn't help but frown. To be honest, she was the cause of all this. If it weren't for the fact that the kitchen knife had secretly eaten half of the sword light, the sword pool wouldn't have thought of such an idea to make things difficult for Hall Master Zhuge. Of course, even if there wasn't the matter of the sword light, the sword pool would still make things difficult for Hall Master Zhuge. The matter of the sword light was just a primer. Even so, Yun Chujiu still felt that she had the responsibility to resolve this matter. She did not want to implicate Hall Master Zhuge and the East, West, and North because of her. The treatment of a sword forging hall disciple was much better than that of an ordinary outer sect disciple. Although Zhuge Bai said it was easy, he would definitely not be willing to leave. Yun Chujiu spoke a few more words with Zhuge Bai, then went to the storeroom to clean the forged treasured swords. As she cleaned the swords, she pondered. If she were to refine pills or talismans, she might be able to help. However, she knew nothing about forging swords, so she couldn't help even if she wanted to. Yun Chujiu thought for a moment before putting down the swords in her hands and heading to the front yard. She wanted to see how the forging process went. Unexpectedly, Hall Master Zhuge said with an extremely displeased expression, "Yun Chujiu, I said that when the sword forging is done, women can't be present. Have you forgotten? Hurry up and go back to the backyard." Yun Chujiu was holding her breath. Originally, she had good intentions and wanted to help, but she didn't expect to be lectured by this stinking rock. She was too lazy to talk nonsense with Hall Master Zhuge, so she returned to the backyard in a huff. But Face, who had already seen the light, was running wildly in the backyard. When he saw Yun Chujiu's angry look, he eagerly approached her and asked what was going on. After hearing Yun Chujiu's words, But Face mysteriously said with his spiritual sense, "Little fairy, I have a good idea. Didn't that stinky rock say that he can't successfully forge the sword because there are women present? Then go to the other sword forging halls and make them unable to successfully forge the sword. Let's see how the sword pool punishes Stinky Rock and the others." Yun Chujiu, this But Face was really bad. However, this was nonsense. She didn't believe that she couldn't succeed with a woman present. However, it was also possible to go to the other sword forging halls and see where the gap was. Therefore, He Xinjiu found an excuse to leave the number 9 sword forging hall and strolled to the number 8 sword forging hall, which was the closest. Pan DN0VE1 COM Yun Chujiu straightened her back. "You've heard about my creation of sword moves, haven't you? The sect master has given me special privileges and I can visit all the sword forging halls to increase my inspiration. Why don't you get out of the way?" That disciple had heard about Yun Chujiu eating poisonous mushrooms to develop 3 sword moves. After being frightened by Yun Chujiu, he subconsciously moved aside. Yun Chujiu swaggered into the number 8 sword forging hall. In the middle of the courtyard, there was a blackened furnace that was as black as the number 9 sword forging hall. 8 strong and stocky disciples were swinging special hammers to smash 2 red-hot sword billets. Beside them stood an old man with a goatee, Shan Yanghu. Yun Chujiu could not help but blink her eyes. It was just as Zhuge Bai had said. There were a few more people than the number 9 sword forging hall. The production rate was naturally higher than theirs. Shan Yanghu's expression immediately darkened when he saw Yun Chujiu. "Who let her in? Don't you know that women are not allowed to be present during sword forging? Hurry up and chase her away." Yun Chujiu was both angry and curious. Why did these guys from the nameless sword sect reject women so much when they were forging swords? Was there something wrong with them? Therefore, when the disciple who opened the door for her came to chase her away, she laughed lightly. "Who said that women cannot be present when forging swords? If your sword forging skills are not good, why are you still blaming women? There's really no place to blame." Shan Yanghu was so angry that his beard was raised. He said angrily out of embarrassment, "Outrageous. Really outrageous. A woman is dirty and unclean, and the god of swords doesn't like it. Once a woman is present, even if the sword forging is successful, the quality will be very low. Yun Chujio was stunned by Shan Yanghe's words. Shan Yanghu saw Yun Chujio's stunned look and sneered a few times, indicating for his disciples to drag Yun Chujio out. Just as the disciple was about to drag Yun Chujio out, Yun Chujio sneered and said, "A woman is dirty and unclean. Then may I ask who gave birth to the incomparably holy you? Could it be that you were born by a man? When you said that a woman is dirty and unclean, you even scolded your own mother and sisters. You are really as holy as a white lotus." Shan Yanghe's face immediately turned red as he pointed at Yun Chujio and said, You are simply spouting nonsense. This is a rule passed down from ancient times, how can you interfere? Get out of here. Yun Chujio sneered, "I don't want to stay in your dirty place." Bah! What the hell is this? After saying that, Yun Chujio turned around and left the number 8 sword forging hall. However, before she left, she blew up the gate of the number 8 sword forging hall. Shan Yanghu and the others were scared silly. Looking at the debris on the ground, Shan Yanghu was almost angered to death. Trembling, he took out his voice transmission talisman and complained to the discipline hall. This Yun Chujio was simply going to rebel. Yun Chujio's heart was very stifled. It was as if there was a ball of burning flames. Even if the gate of the number 8 sword forging hall was blown up, it was still unable to dispel the anger in her heart. What nonsense was this dirty and unclean? In the end, it was still discrimination against women. Even in a world like Atlas continent, where the strong were respected, there was still contempt for women. Moreover, it was obvious that compared to the southern continent, the northern continent's situation was more serious. In the past few days, she had long discovered that although the Nameless Sword sect had quite a number of female disciples, most of them were outer sect disciples or odd job workers. Some of them were even the concubines of the sect's elders. The number 7 sword forging hall also had a few more people than the number 9 sword forging hall. Before she could say anything, the hall master of the number 7 sword forging hall roared and ordered people to kick her out. Get rid of her. Get rid of her. How can you let a woman enter the sword forging hall? What bad luck. Yun Chujio did not waste time talking to him and turned around to leave happily. However, before she left, she also blew up the door of the number 7 sword forging hall. Hei Shinjo did not care how the people of the number 7 sword forging hall scolded her. She turned around and arrived at the number 6 sword forging hall. Soon, except for the number 9 sword forging hall, the 8 doors of the lower house were all blown up by Hei Shinjo. The 8 hall masters of the sword forging hall nearly fainted from anger. They all complained to the discipline hall and demanded that Yun Chujio, the culprit, be punished severely. Manager Song, who was on duty at the discipline hall, felt his head buzz when he heard that Yun Chujio was causing trouble again. The Nameless Sword sect had always been peaceful. Why did something keep happening recently? Moreover, it was all related to that Yun Chujio. This Yun Chujio had just entered the sect when she beat up the servants of the lower house's dining hall. Then, she sounded the heaven-shaking drum. In the end, she even expelled Manager Fan and Manager Tian from the sect. Just now, the higher-ups of the sect had ordered the discipline hall to strictly investigate the 2 disciples who escorted Yun Chujio to the Nameless Patriarch's cave abode and the few disciples who were in charge of repairing the teleportation array. He was in a terrible situation, but now, this troublemaker had blown up the gate of the sword forging hall from number 1 to number 8 for no reason. Wasn't this a trick? Manager Song thought for a moment and did not immediately send people to capture Yun Chujio. He planned to go to the sword forging halls to understand the situation first so that Yun Chujio would not backstab him. After understanding the truth of the matter, it was not too late to capture Yun Chujio. On the other side, after Hei Shinjo blew up the 8 gates, she felt that the anger in her heart had dissipated a little. She could not be bothered to return to Sword Forging Hall number 9 because she knew that Hall Master Zhuge must have heard about the commotion. When she went back, she would also be reprimanded by him. A large part of the reason why she was so angry today was because she recalled her previous life. Pan de N0VE1. After she found this news, she did not continue to investigate further. What was the point of finding such parents? Because of their abandonment, she had been a little beggar since she was young. Every day, she had only one task in life, and that was to fill her stomach. She had even fallen to the point of snatching food from dogs. Therefore, when she heard those sword forgers' prejudice and slander towards women today, she could no longer suppress the anger in her heart. So what if she was a woman? Was a woman inferior to others? Yun Chujio walked forward aimlessly. As she walked, her eyes became a little moist. She originally thought that the pain in her heart had been healed by time, but she did not expect that she would still be stimulated by a single sentence and bleed profusely. Perhaps, her obsession with her parents had not been resolved. Otherwise, she would not be so persistent in trying to find her biological parents in this body. When Yun Chujio calmed down a little, she realized that she was standing at the door of a courtyard. There was no plaque on the door, and there were no disciples guarding it. Yun Chujio took out a map and compared it. She found that the name and purpose of this courtyard were not marked on the map. She could not help but feel curious. She went forward and knocked on the door, but there was no response. Yun Chujio thought about it. It was already late, and she did not want to go back and see Hall Master Zhuge's ugly face. It was not bad to spend the night in this courtyard. Therefore, Yun Chujio pushed open the door of the courtyard. Looking at the situation in the courtyard, Yun Chujio could not help but be stunned. This was also a sword forging hall. The reason why Yun Chujio had such a judgment was that there was a dark weapon forging furnace in the center of the courtyard. It looked exactly the same as the weapon forging furnace of the number 9 sword forging hall. However, there was no earth fire burning underneath. It seemed that no one had used it for many years. Yun Chujio frowned. She was annoyed whenever she saw the furnace. She didn't bother to look at it anymore and went straight to the backyard. The layout of the backyard was similar to the number 9 forging sword hall. Yun Chujio randomly picked a room and cleaned it briefly before lying on the bed. She recalled what happened today and knew that she had vented her anger. Moreover, she was too impulsive and couldn't avoid being punished. But she had done what she had to do. This fellow was really ambitious. After thinking for a while, he fell asleep in a daze. Hei Shinjo fell asleep. The discipline hall, Hall Master Zhuge, and the others were looking for her like crazy. After the discipline hall's manager Song understood what had happened, his heart was like a dog that had been bemoaned. He didn't know if the higher-ups had gone crazy, but they shouldn't have sent a little girl like Yun Chujio to the number 9 sword forging hall. Although there was no explicit rule, everyone knew that the sword forging hall did not accept girls. Wasn't this just looking for trouble? If it had been an ordinary female disciple, it would have been fine. Yun Chujio was not someone to be worried about. Now, she had blown up all 8 doors of the sword forging hall and even went missing. It was really troublesome. However, where did this Yun Chujio run off to? Why didn't the identity jade plate respond? Could it be that she fled because she was afraid of punishment? That didn't make sense. There were people guarding the sect gate, and Yun Chujio's spiritual power was not high, so how could she escape? Yun Chujio slept until the sun was high in the sky. She stretched lazily, thinking that she was awesome. It had to be said that this guy's self-healing ability was very strong. There was nothing that could not be solved by a good night's sleep. This guy picked up the identity jade token and could not help but feel a little puzzled. Logically speaking, since she had caused such a big incident, the identity jade token should not be so quiet. Could it be that those people were in the wrong, so they did not go to the discipline hall to complain? Even if those people did not complain, the north, south, east, and west should not have ignored her. Or perhaps her identity jade token was broken. The more Yun Chujio thought about it, the more she felt that this conclusion was reliable. Anyway, her identity jade token was broken, and it was not her problem. She could hide here and practice the sword technique she saw on the cliff. Therefore, Hei Shinjio ate some simple food. After she left the house, she began to practice the sword technique she saw on the cliff in the courtyard. The more Yun Chujio practiced, the more she felt that this sword technique was really mysterious. Although it was not a complete set of sword technique, this half set of sword technique was enough for her to analyze and study. Once Hei Shinjio became focused, she was even afraid of herself. Because this fellow was obsessed with this sword technique, he had almost forgotten to eat and sleep, not to mention leaving this courtyard. Therefore, for 3 days in a row, the discipline hall searched the entire nameless sword sect, but they still could not find any trace of Yun Chujio. Almost everyone thought that Yun Chujio had fled because she was afraid of punishment. Elder Wan immediately suggested to Master Ouyang to issue a sect arrest warrant to arrest Yun Chujio in the entire northern continent. Master Ouyang found an excuse but didn't agree. He always felt that that little girl was extraordinarily bold. How could she flee because she was afraid of punishment just because she blew up 8 gates? This was not in line with her style of doing things. However, where did the little girl go? On the other side, Hei Shinjio collapsed on the ground due to the exhaustion of her spiritual energy and physical strength. She mumbled softly, "This sword technique is too mysterious. I'm such a smart person, but I've only grasped the tip of it. However, it's also possible that I don't have enough spiritual energy, so I can't grasp some of the mysteries. Forget it, I haven't gone out for a few days. Those people are probably going to die of anger. I'd better go out and make a public appearance." Thus, Hei Shinjio ate something and went to the front yard. She wanted to open the door to go out, but she found that the door couldn't be opened. Hei Shinjio kicked, knocked, and could not open the door. She gritted her teeth, took out the talisman, and tried to blast the door open. Unfortunately, she found that the talisman could not be used. She tried to use the sound transmission talisman again, but it could not be used. It turned out that it was not her identity jade plate that was broken, but there was a barrier here. Hei Shinjio looked at the ridiculously sturdy door, and a sad thought arose in her heart. Could it be that she had suffered retribution because she blew up 8 doors? Yun Chujio stretched her neck and shouted a few times, but there was no reaction as expected. However, this guy was a little puzzled. Why didn't the people of the discipline hall search this place? She didn't notice anything unusual when she came in. It was obvious that it was useless to think about this now. It was better to think of a way to get out. Therefore, this fellow took out her omnipotent kitchen knife and prepared to chop down the main door. Unfortunately, before she could do so, the main door had disappeared without a trace. PN0V1 Commune Chujio, fuck. How could he play like this? Just as the guy was still in a daze while holding the large kitchen knife, a few wisps of white mist drifted out from the abandoned crafting furnace and finally transformed into a sloppy old man. However, it was very faint, as if it was going to disappear at any moment. The old man saw Hei Shinjio frowning and said with disdain, "Why is it a girl? Can the nameless sword sect let girls forge swords now? It's really getting worse with each generation. No wonder no one has come in to forge swords for a long time." Yun Chujio was already holding her anger because she could not go out. Now that she heard the old man say this, she was even angrier. What's wrong with a girl? A girl eats your food and drinks your water. Let me out quickly. The old man snorted coldly. Girl, don't be stubborn. Let's not talk about other things. When it comes to forging swords, women are inferior to men. Whether it's beating the sword billet or infusing sword intent, a girl doll can't do either. Moreover, when forging a sword, if there's a girl doll present, the men will be distracted, so the sword forging won't succeed. When Yun Chujio heard the old man's last words, she couldn't help but have a thought. She raised her eyebrows. Old man, why do I listen to your meaning? When forging a sword, strictly forbidding women to be present, isn't it because it's dirty or unclean? Is it because I'm afraid that the men who forge the sword will be distracted? That's right, so when I forge the sword, I forbid women from approaching, so as to avoid distracting those little rascals. Alright, cut the crap. Hurry up and light the fire to forge the sword. If the forging doesn't succeed, don't go out. However, a girl like you probably won't succeed in forging the sword either. It's not bad for you to stay here and clean. The old man said disdainfully. Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and said, Old man, I don't know how to forge a sword at all, so I can't forge the sky dome sword that you mentioned. Let me out. I'll find someone else to help you forge the sword. The old man snorted and said, Don't lie to me. Let me do some calculations. It seems that no one has come in for a long time. Although you're a girl and your spiritual power is terrible, it's still better than no one. Cut the crap and forge the sword. Hei Shinjo was about to release Tao Wu and the rest to deal with the elder's remnant soul when the elder sensed something and sniffed. To tell you the truth, the enchantment here is formed by my obsession. You will not be able to get out even if my soul is shattered, unless you forge the firmament sword. Hei Shinjo did not know if what the old man said was true, but she did not dare to take the risk. If this place was really the result of the old man's obsession, it would be more troublesome for her to kill the old man. The old man's soul did not dissipate, so he could at least give her some advice. If she killed the old man, she would really be blind. Thinking of this, Hei Shinjo instantly smiled like a flower. Senior, I was just joking. To be able to meet you is simply an honor for 3 lifetimes. The old man's remnant soul was almost scared away by this guy's attitude. Was this little girl crazy? She was swearing just now. How did it become my great honor in such a short time? Senior, if I'm not wrong, you should be the sword forging master of the Nameless Sword sect, right? How should I address you? Which generation are you from? Although the old man could not figure out what Yun Chujio was up to, he still said rather conceitedly, That's right. I am the 5th generation disciple of the Nameless Sword sect. As for my real name, I have long forgotten it. They all call me Jian Feng. Yun Chujio cursed in her heart. Jian Feng. What an image. He was simply a lunatic. However, a 10th generation disciple. She was the 32nd generation disciple of the Nameless Sword sect. This old man was truly a senior. Yun Chujio's heart suddenly jolted. Could this old man know the second half of the sword technique? If she could learn the second half of the sword technique, she wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Thus, this fellow said with a smile, So it's Senior Jian Feng. A few days ago, I was practicing the sword technique in the backyard. You've seen it too, right? What do you think? Upon hearing her words, Jian Feng. The contemptuous expression on her face was somewhat restrained. The swordsmanship you're practicing is very mysterious. It's even more mysterious than the Nameless Sword sect's Nameless Sword technique. It seems that the Nameless Sword sect has a rising star. Let me ask you, who improved this swordsmanship? Yun Chujio's heart moved again. It seemed that even the 10th generation disciples had never seen the swordsmanship on the cliff. It seemed that there was a big secret behind this swordsmanship. She could not reveal it anymore, or it would backfire. As expected, Jian Feng turned his attention to sword forging and said with disdain, It's just that no one has come in for many years. Otherwise, I wouldn't be bothered with you, little girl. Just kill her. You have no foundation in sword forging, yet you still dare to enter my sword hut. You really overestimate yourself. Yun Chujio did not argue with Jian Feng. She said with a smile, I indeed overestimate myself. Otherwise, you can just let me go. Why waste your energy? Jian Feng snorted coldly. Stop playing tricks on me. If you can't forge the firmament sword, don't even think about going out. Hearing Jian Feng's words, Yun Chujiu knew that she could only forge the sword obediently. She said with a bitter face, Senior Jian Feng, there's no earth fire and no ores here. How can I forge the sword? Jian Feng looked at her as if she was an idiot. With a wave of her sleeve, the earth fire under the furnace started to burn, and a lot of ores appeared on the ground. Now, let's first burn the ores into refined iron blocks, then proceed to the next step. Yun Chujiu did as she was told and threw a few ores into the furnace. Then, she bitterly waited for the ores to be burned into refined iron blocks. What Yun Chujiu did not know was that the moment the earth fire burned in the sword hut, the nameless sword sect exploded. Oh my God! The earth fire switch of the sword hut has actually been activated. This means that someone has entered the sword hut. TSK, I wonder who is so courageous. What's the difference between this and courting death? One must know that there is Jian Feng's obsession in the sword hut. It is said that no one has ever come out alive from there. However, it is said that Jian Feng's temper is strange. Many people who enter are immediately slapped to death and thrown out. It seems that the one who entered this time has caught his eye. Could it be that a sword forger has entered? Pan, the N0VE1 Master Ouyang also received the news, but after a thorough investigation, he did not find any missing disciples. In the end, it was Elder Gu who reminded him, Master, didn't Yun Chujiu go missing for a few days? Could it be that the person in the sword hut is her? Master Ouyang, all the higher-ups of the sect looked at each other. Didn't they say that Jian Feng did not like the presence of women when she forged her sword? It was said that because the god of swords did not like women, female disciples were strictly forbidden from approaching the weapon refining furnace. It was precisely because of this that the sword forgers of the Nameless Sword sect would not allow women to get close to the furnace over time. Why did he leave that little girl, Yun Chujiu, behind now? Elder Wan's heart was filled with hatred. He originally thought that the little girl had fled in fear of punishment. When the time came, he would do something to kill her. He did not expect that she would actually enter the sword hut. However, she would not be able to live long after entering the sword hut. Jian Feng's patience was extremely poor. She would kill the disciples who entered the sword hut at any time. Therefore, even though many sword forgers coveted Jian Feng's sword forgery skills, it had been many years since anyone dared to enter the sword hut again. Elder Wan's conjecture was right. Jian Feng's patience had indeed run out very quickly. He Xinjiu did not have any foundation in sword forgery. After throwing the iron ore into the sword hut, she started to play by herself. Jian Feng was almost angered to death. However, he considered that no one had come in for a long time, and his soul was already very weak. It might dissipate one day, so he decided to bear with it. Finally, under Jian Feng's guidance, He Xinjiu burned the ore into iron. Next, she had to hammer the sword billet. The hammer that hammered the sword billet weighed 1,000 pounds. After hammering it a few times, He Xinjiu did not feel like hammering anymore. Senior Jian Feng, isn't this enough? Look, this is already in the shape of a sword. It's impossible to hammer this thing into flowers, isn't it? Jian Feng looked at the pancake-like sword billet and almost died from anger. She roared furiously, you better hammer it 1,000 times and stop talking nonsense. He Xinjiu shrunk her neck and said embarrassedly, I'll hammer it then. What are you shouting for? 1, 2, 3, Jian Feng calmed down slightly when she saw Yun Chujiu starting to hammer the sword billet. However, she almost fainted from anger. A certain Jiu counted like this. 1, 2, 3, 9, 15, 80, 200, 200, 300, you, shut up. can't you even count? Senior Jian Feng, you're right. I really can't count. Why don't I hammer and you count for me? Jian Feng gnashed her teeth in anger and kept muttering in her heart. It was not easy for someone to come in. She had to endure, she had to endure. Therefore, Jian Feng gritted her teeth and counted. He Xinjiu began to hammer the sword billet. As he hammered, he complained in his heart, this is not a human's job. Chapter 3785, Puppet number 4. Yun Chujiu hammered it for more than 500 times, but she couldn't move it anymore. Normally, this sword billet could only be hammered by 4 male disciples working together. It was already extraordinary for her to be able to hammer it for 500 times. However, this guy's eyes suddenly lit up. Although she couldn't hammer it, the puppet could. Therefore, this guy let out puppet number 4. Greetings, master. Yun Chujiu waved her hand and stuffed the hammer into puppet number 4's hand. She pointed at the sword and said, you can beat it 500 more times and turn it into the shape of a sword. Puppet number 4 immediately began to beat it with the same force every time. It was much stronger than He Xinjia's perfunctory look. Yun Chujiu sat down on the ground. Damn it, this forging sword was indeed not suitable for a peerless beauty like her. It was better to let those smelly men think that they were the ones forging the sword. Yun Chujiu rested for a while and realized that Jian Feng had not said anything for a long time. She looked up and saw Jian Feng staring at puppet number 4 like a fool, as if he was looking at his beloved girl. Yun Chujiu's heart tightened. Oh no! She was so focused on saving trouble that she forgot that puppet number 4 could not be exposed to the public. If Jian Feng had the intention to covet her, it would be difficult to deal with him. However, He Xinjiu thought about it and realized that Jian Feng was just a remnant soul. She was completely confident that she could kill him. Although this place was formed by his obsession, since the earth fire could burn, it meant that there was a passage to the outside world. She was not afraid of being burned by the fire. At worst, she could just leave through the passage of the earth fire. However, it would be more troublesome after she got out. Moreover, she wanted to learn something about sword forging, so she did not go against Jian Feng. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. While He Xinjiu was thinking, she heard Jian Feng's trembling voice say, Girl, who made this puppet? It has intelligence. Yun Chujiu's heart moved, but she did not hide it. She said directly, I made it. It has intelligence because I divided a strand of my spiritual sense and made it into a puppet disc. Jian Feng looked at Yun Chujiu in disbelief for a while. Seeing that she did not look like she was lying, he mumbled in a daze, I divided a strand of my spiritual sense and made it into a puppet disc. So that's it. So that's it. Yun Chujiu frowned. It was over. Jian Feng had really become a lunatic this time. Jian Feng was stimulated by something, and his figure suddenly disappeared. Yun Chujiu shouted for a long time, but Jian Feng did not appear again. Yun Chujiu looked at the sword slab that had been beaten neatly by puppet number 4 and felt troubled. She did not know what she should do next. Should she just wait for it to cool down? This guy thought and did the same thing. He did not care about the sword slab, but let puppet number 4 stand guard at the side while she lay on the recliner to rest. She had not slept for 3 days because she had been practicing her swordsmanship. She was very tired just now, so she quickly fell asleep in a daze. After Yun Chujiu woke up, she found Jian Feng checking the sword billet that had already been hammered. She eagerly went over and asked, Senior, what do you think of this sword billet? Is it perfect? Jian Feng nodded. Not bad, it is indeed more perfect than hammering with human strength. Next, let's start the filing. After He Xinjiu, this lazy girl, learned how to file, she immediately had puppet number 4 imitate her. Jian Feng didn't say anything, but she would give puppet number 4 some pointers from time to time. After several steps, they finally reached the most crucial step of infusing the sword intent. Pan DN0VE1CM. Next, you try to release all the sword intent and infuse it into the treasure sword. Jian Feng said seriously. Yun Chuzhou also knew that success or failure depended on this one move. Therefore, she followed Jian Feng's instructions and began to release her sword intent. She also tried to infuse it into the treasure sword. However, it was easier said than done. If infusing sword intent was that simple, the nameless sword sect would not only have a few sword forgers. Yun Chuzhou tried several times but failed. Jian Feng could not help but shake his head. Could it be that it was the will of heaven? Even if he had found the key to the Skydome sword, he still could not forge it successfully. Yun Chujia's fighting spirit was stimulated. She was not interested in the boring beating of the sword, but she was very interested in this kind of technical thing. Therefore, this guy practiced repeatedly until he was exhausted, and then he stopped temporarily. Jian Feng could not help but scold with a smile, "You little girl, you are a little lunatic. You can practice the sword for a few days without sleep or rest, and you can also practice until you are exhausted by infusing sword intent. If you are not a little lunatic, then what are you?" Yun Chuzhou also smiled. In some aspects, she was indeed similar to this old man. With the two of them smiling, the estrangement between them from before had dissipated a little. It was as if they appreciated each other. He didn't know if Jian Feng had figured out some things, but in the next few days, even if Yun Chuzhou failed to infuse her sword will, he wasn't angry. Instead, he even had time to give Yun Chuzhou some pointers on her swordsmanship. Yun Chuzhou used to be closed door. Now that she had Jian Feng's guidance, she immediately solved many of the doubts that had troubled her. In her heart, she already regarded Jian Feng as half a master. However, Jian Feng's figure was becoming fainter and fainter, as if he would disappear at any time. On this day, Yun Chuzhou once again failed to infuse her sword intent. Jian Feng comforted her, "Don't be discouraged. I believe that with your intelligence, you will succeed very soon. You little girl, not only are you nimble and clear, but you also have a resolute personality. You will definitely have a great fortune in the future." Yun Chuzhou blinked her eyes and said shamelessly, "There's no need for that in the future. When I meet you, won't I have a great fortune?" Jian Feng was stunned for a moment and then burst into laughter. He laughed and sighed, "It's my great fortune to meet a girl like you. Your words reminded me that I haven't been able to successfully refine the firmament sword because I have to add a trace of spiritual sense into it at the same time. When you can infuse sword intent into it, you'll definitely be able to forge the firmament sword. But unfortunately, I can't hold on for long. I'm afraid I won't be able to see the moment and the firmament sword is out of the furnace." Yun Chuzhou hesitated for a moment before saying, "Senior, I have an ancient jade bottle. Why don't you go inside? This way, I can at least guarantee that your soul won't dissipate." Jian Feng was stunned for a moment before he bitterly smiled, "I appreciate your kind intentions. It's just that my situation is special. My soul is attached to my obsession, that's why it hasn't completely dissipated. I'm afraid that I won't be able to take human form very soon. The moment the obsession disappears, I will completely disappear from this world." Yun Chuzhou couldn't tell what she felt at that moment. She hadn't been with Jian Feng for long, and they were enemies at the beginning. But now, hearing him say that, she still felt a bit sad. In the end, Yun Chuzhou had always been a reckless person. The people she thought were good were always good, and the people she thought were bad, she would never like them. For example, Jian Feng, in the eyes of most people, was a lunatic. However, she felt that this old man was not bad, he had a true personality. Moreover, he had taught her sword forging techniques and swordsmanship. In her heart, she already regarded him as half a master. Naturally, she did not want him to disappear just like that. PN0V1 Com, although the firmament sword sounds pretty awesome, it's not a godly sword, right? Isn't the ultimate dream of a sword forger to forge a godly sword? Don't you want to forge a godly sword? After hearing Yun Chujia's words, Jian Feng's expression became a little crazy. Godly sword? That's right, the Skydome sword can only be considered as an upper-grade immortal sword at most. I also want to forge a godly sword that is unique. As Jian Feng mumbled, his entire body became more corporeal than before. Yun Chuzhou did not know if she was happy or worried. Did she dig herself into a hole and bury herself? However, the words had already been said and it had become a fait accompli. It was useless even if she regretted it. Moreover, Jian Feng was also half her master. So what if she was saved? Jian Feng mumbled for a while before his expression recovered a little. When he saw He Xinjiu, he said embarrassedly and guiltily, "Girl, this. It seems that you won't be able to leave for a while. We still need to refine a divine sword after refining the firmament sword." Yun Chuzhou sighed. "I still have a lot of things to do. I don't have time to play with you here. I'm leaving now. I'll come back to save you when I find a way to separate your soul from your obsession." Jian Feng looked at He Xinjiu in disbelief. He felt that the little girl must have been driven mad by the stimulation. She was leaving. How? If his obsession did not dissipate, she would not be able to leave this place. Yun Chuzhou pointed at the earth fire under the furnace. "I'm leaving through the tunnel of earth fire. Although it's a little troublesome, it's still better than letting you die. After all, there's only one Jian Feng in this world." Jian Feng did not care about the gratitude in his heart. He looked at Yun Chuzhou worriedly. "Little girl, are you feverish or stupid? This earth fire is different from ordinary fire. How could you leave through the tunnel of earth fire?" Sigh. "This is all my fault. I shouldn't have said anything to you about dissipating. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said anything about the divine sword. Don't be anxious. Let's think of another way. We might be able to successfully forge it." Jian Feng did not believe what she said. How could the divine sword be so easy to forge? He was just trying to comfort Yun Chuzhou. Yun Chuzhou glanced at Jian Feng, then reached out her hand toward the burning earth fire. Jian Feng cried out in fear, "Stop! Stop! Are you crazy?" However, in the next moment, he was stunned. He saw that the little girl's white jade-like hand was not damaged at all, and she even waved her hand proudly in the earth fire. How was this possible? Fire-repelling pearl? You have a fire-repelling pearl? Jian Feng suddenly reacted and exclaimed. Yun Chuzhou nodded. Firstly, she did have a good impression of Jian Feng. Secondly, she had enough confidence to kill Jian Feng. Therefore, she was not afraid of Jian Feng killing people and stealing treasures. However, Jian Feng's face showed a pleasantly surprised expression. That's great. Then you can leave this place safely. A little child like you really shouldn't waste time with me here. Since that's the case, you can leave now. Yun Chuzhou shook her head. I can't leave now. I'll leave at night. Otherwise, I won't be able to get out of here. In fact, this guy was very uncertain. If he left through the tunnel of earth fire, wouldn't it be too flashy? After a while, He Xinjiu changed her mind and decided to leave immediately. Jian Feng was confused. Didn't you say that it would be easier to leave at night? Why are you leaving now? Yun Chuzhou blinked her eyes and explained her thoughts. She originally planned to leave through the entrance of the earth fire main pipeline, which would be more convenient at night. However, when she thought about it just now, there were too many unpredictable factors to leave through the entrance of the main pipeline. It would be best if she could leave through the exit of the number 9 forging sword hall. That way, she could appear in her dormitory without anyone noticing. Then, there was a problem. How could she know which of the many pipelines led to the number 9 forging sword hall? The only way was to try it one by one. He would hide in every exit of the earth fire and listen to the voices outside. Eventually, he would find the pipes of the number 9 sword forging hall. Therefore, he could only choose daytime because there were very few people talking at night. He could not determine which sword forging hall or alchemy room it was. Jian Feng felt that what Yun Chujio said made sense, so he nodded. However, he was reluctant to part with her. Whether he was alive or dead, he was only focused on the sword forging. He did not expect to have another connection now. Yun Chujio comforted him, "It's okay, it's okay. If this trip is successful, I will come in to see you every once in a while." Although Jian Feng knew that Yun Chujio was comforting him, he also had some thoughts in his heart, and the sadness in his heart could not help but fade a little. Yun Chujio asked puppet number 4 and puppet number 5 to move the furnace away. Indeed, there was an earth fire pipeline under it, and it was just enough to accommodate one person. Yun Chujio waved her claws at Jian Feng and then entered the earth fire tunnel. Although Yun Chujio was not afraid of the earth fire, she had to bend down and walk forward in the tunnel, which exhausted her. After trying more than a dozen exits, she finally found the exit of number 9 forging sword hall. However, she estimated the time. It was only evening now, so she needed to wait for another 4 hours. Outside, Hall Master Zhuge and the east, west, south, and north were forging swords. Zhuge Bei said in puzzlement, "Why do I feel that the earth fire today is a little strange? Why is the flame jumping? It seems to be unstable." Zhuge Dong frowned. "Perhaps the quality of the earth fire purchased in this batch isn't too good. If you turn the switch a little bigger, there shouldn't be any problems." The two of them did not know that the earth fire was unstable because a certain geo was in the middle of the pipeline. Naturally, the earth fire output was weak and unstable. The speaker did not mean what he said, but the listener was interested. Hei Xinjiu remembered that the other 8 sword forging halls had given a lot of help to number 9 sword forging hall in the past. Moreover, if number 9 sword forging hall was the only one who did not complete the mission this time, number 9 sword forging hall would definitely be punished. However, if the other 8 forging sword halls also failed to complete the mission, then they would naturally not only punish the number 9 forging sword hall. When Hei Xinjiu thought of this, bad water rose up. This guy had already found the pattern of these underground fire pipes after wandering around just now, so he knew that the few pipes near the number 9 forging sword hall were the pipes of the lower house forging sword hall. This guy shamelessly placed a pile of stones not far from the exit of the pipes in the other 8 forging halls. Although the underground fire could burn the stones into ashes sooner or later, it still needed time, right? It was enough to slow down the progress of those 8 forging sword halls. By the time Hei Xinjiu finished her evil deed, it was already the second half of the night. This fellow pricked up his ears to listen. Other than the sound of iron being calcined in the furnace, there was no other sound outside. Yun Chujio knew that because there was no strict time limit for refining iron ore, and there was no need for anyone to watch from the side, the forging sword hall would usually use the night to refine iron ore. Yun Chujio deliberately made a slight noise, but there was still nothing unusual. Only then did she carefully climb out of the earth fire pipe. Yun Chujio put the furnace back into place, and then quietly returned to her room. "Hall Master, good morning, my 4 senior brothers." The rice bowl in Zhuge Bai's hand fell to the ground and he rubbed his eyes. Junior Sister Yun. Didn't you run away because you were afraid of punishment?" Yun Chujio glared at him. "I didn't do anything bad, why would I run away? I've been cultivating in the room, alright." "Cultivating in the room?" Hall Master Zhuge and the others looked at each other. They had looked for many places, but they really hadn't gone to Yun Chujio's room because they had watched Yun Chujio go out and never come back. They would never have thought that she was in their own courtyard. Zhuge Dong frowned. Junior sister Yun, since you're in your own room, why didn't you say anything when we called you? Yun Chujiu spread out her hands. I'm at a critical juncture in my cultivation, so I can't be distracted. Otherwise, it would be easy for me to go mad. I'm sorry. Besides, I thought you guys would come into the room to look for me. Who would have thought that you guys didn't come into the room? Hall Master Zhuge and the others took a look. Was this the legendary darkness under the lamp? The most conspicuous place was the easiest to overlook. However, this also explained why the disciples guarding the mountain gate did not see Yun Chujiu escape. It was because she did not escape from the sect at all. That's not right, junior sister Yun. Didn't they say that you entered the sword hut? Zhuge 11 asked in puzzlement. Sword hut? What kind of place is the sword hut? I only know of the sword pool and the sword hall. Does our nameless sword sect still have a sword hut? Yun Chujiu had a puzzled look. Hall Master Zhuge did not have any doubts, because he originally felt that it was impossible for Jian Feng to keep Yun Chujiu. After all, Jian Feng was famous for not liking women, so how could he possibly keep Yun Chujiu? The reason why the earth fire in the sword hut was activated was probably because Jian Feng was playing tricks again. It was not because someone had entered. Under He Xinjia's superb lying skills, Hall Master Zhuge and the other three finally confirmed that Yun Chujiu had been cultivating in seclusion in her own room these days. Just as Hall Master Zhuge was about to say something, Yun Chujiu raised her eyebrows and said, Hall Master, I know what you want to say. Don't worry, I'll go to the discipline hall after breakfast and turn myself in. If I blow up someone's door, I'll compensate them according to the price. No matter how the sect deals with me, I'll obediently accept it. I won't say a word. Hall Master Zhuge's stomach was full of words, and he was instantly rendered speechless by He Xinjiu. Sure enough, after He Xinjiu had her breakfast, she swaggered out of the number 9 sword forging hall and turned herself in to the discipline hall. Hall Master Zhuge hesitated for a moment. In the end, he asked Zhuge Dong to accompany Yun Chujiu. If there was anything, he would report it to him. The moment He Xinjiu appeared, the nameless sword sect exploded. Wasn't this the Yun Chujiu who blew up the 8 gates? Wasn't this the Yun Chujiu who had already fled in fear of punishment? Wasn't this the Yun Chujiu who was rumored to have entered the sword hut? Yun Chujiu was delighted to discover that her reputation in the nameless sword sect seemed to have grown. It seemed that there was no one who did not know her. This fellow greeted everyone as he walked. It did not seem like he was going to turn himself in. Instead, it seemed like he was inspecting his work. Very soon, many people gathered behind Yun Chujiu. Naturally, they were all prepared to watch the show. They were extremely curious about where Yun Chujiu had been hiding for the past few days. Why had she suddenly appeared? Very soon, the news of Yun Chujiu's appearance reached the ears of the sect's higher-ups. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. What? Yun Chujiu wasn't in the sword hut. And she didn't flee in fear of punishment. She actually turned herself in. Although Master Ouyang really wanted to go to the discipline hall to see what was going on, he had to maintain his identity. Naturally, it wasn't good for him to personally ask about the matter of a small handyman. He could only wait for the final result. Manager Song of the discipline hall felt that his right eyelid was twitching non-stop early in the morning. He felt uneasy, as if something was going to happen. Just as he was feeling uneasy, his disciples rushed over to report, Manager Song, that Yun Chujiu has come to surrender. Manager Song was also quite surprised. He hurried to the square of the discipline hall. Little Dong Dong, isn't it boring for you to stay here all day? Little Dong Dong, if you're really bored, why don't you carry me and walk around the nameless sword sect? Little Dong Dong, haven't you and Cici played together before? Follow me and I guarantee that you will live to a new height. The corner of Manager Song's eyes twitched violently. What the hell were Little Dong and Cece? Besides, these two Heichi were made of stone and didn't have any intelligence. Wasn't she talking to a cow? Manager Song picked up the startled wood on the table and patted it. Hei Shinjo acted as if she didn't hear him and continued to flirt with the Heichi. Manager Song had to stretch his neck and shout, "Yun Chujio, didn't you come to surrender yourself? What are you waiting for? Come here quickly." Yun Chujio then jumped up and touched the ears of the Heichi. Then she swaggered to the front of Manager Song. "Manager Song, you don't have to interrogate me anymore. I'll confess everything. I blew up the doors of the sword forging hall from number 1 to number 8, Yun Chujio said as if she was doing everything by herself. Manager Song was a little surprised. He thought that Yun Chujio would give him a talk, but he didn't expect her to confess voluntarily. "Since you confessed voluntarily, then I'll deal with you according to the rules of the sect. You destroyed the property of the sect for no reason, and you hid your whereabouts to avoid punishment. It's very bad. Therefore, in addition to compensating for the loss of the 8 gates, you'll also have to pay a fine of 1 million high-grade spirit stones, and you'll also be locked in the bitter cold cave for 3 months. Do you have any objections?" "No objections. Manager Song, you've indeed dealt with matters fairly. I admit my punishment," Yun Chujio said obediently. Manager Song was practically looking at Yun Chujio with a whole new level of respect. He originally thought that this troublemaker would stir up trouble, but he didn't expect that she would confess her crimes so smoothly. And she didn't have any objection to the punishment at all. It seemed that he had misunderstood her before. This little girl was just a little playful in the end. In fact, she wasn't as cunning and mischievous as the rumors said. Not to mention Manager Song, even Zhuge Dong felt that there was something wrong with his ear. Was this still the junior sister Yun he knew? Not to mention other things, she actually admitted to a penalty of 1 million upper-grade spirit stones. This fellow was so stingy that he even wanted to take advantage of a green onion in the canteen, okay? How could he admit to the penalty so obediently? However, Zhuge Dong saw that Yun Chujio was really going to sign on the punishment document. Could it be that junior sister Yun had changed her personality because she had been in seclusion for a few days? Just when Yun Chujio was about to sign on the punishment document, someone in the crowd exclaimed, "Oh my God! What's going on? Why are the ears of the Xiaji bleeding? Oh my God, it's true! What's going on? These 2 stone Xiaji have been here for tens of thousands of years, and this is the first time such a situation has happened. Does it mean that there is an unjust case? It is said that this Heichi is clearly right and wrong, and that is why it is placed here. This ear is bleeding all of a sudden. I'm afraid there is a reason for it." Manager Song's head buzzed. The matter of Heichi's ear bleeding could be big or small. To say it was just an accident, but to say it was big, it meant that he could not distinguish between right and wrong. If he randomly solved the case, his future in the Nameless Sword sect would be ruined. No wonder his right eye kept twitching in the morning. It turned out that something really bad had happened. Manager Song suddenly widened his eyes. Previously, Yun Chujio had been flirting with Shiji. At the end, when she left, she seemed to jump up and touch Zichi's ear. Could it be her doing? But under the watchful eyes of everyone, she did not do anything. She only touched Zichi's ear. Was it just a coincidence? Just when Manager Song was in a daze, he heard Yun Chujio sigh faintly. Sigh. I was going to turn this into a small matter. It's fine if I can bear with this matter. I didn't expect Xie Ji to be unable to bear with it. I can only tell the truth. The onlookers thought that there would be no more excitement today and that it would be a downer. Now that they saw that not only Xie Ji's ear was bleeding, but Yun Chujio also said that there was a secret, they immediately widened their eyes and listened attentively. Although Manager Song was very suspicious, he could not stop Yun Chujio from speaking, so he could only acquiesce. Everyone, think about it. I am not a lunatic or a fool. Why would I blow up the gate of the sword forging hall number 1 to number 8? Besides, there are no worries in the distant days and there are no grudges in the recent days. Why would I offend them for no reason? Everyone could not help but nod their heads. They were also very puzzled. This Yun Chujio seemed to be quite smart. Why did she blow up 8 gates for no reason? Yun Chujio spread her hands. My greatest strength and greatest weakness is that I'm too kind. I feel that it's a great fortune for me to be able to join the Nameless Sword sect. That's why I always think of contributing to our Nameless Sword sect. You should have heard that when I was in the Nameless Ancestral Master's cave abode, I had received guidance from the Ancestral Master. I've always kept this matter in mind. When I went to Forging Hall number 8 that day, Martial Uncle Yang kept shouting at me about how women shouldn't get close to the furnace. I immediately thought of the Grandmaster's words. Isn't this just being rigid and conformist? Yun Chujio paused at this point and observed the expressions of the crowd without batting an eyelid. She saw that many people did not think much of this. This fellow thought to herself, it seems that this patriarchal culture cannot be changed in a short period of time. It would be better for her to change her concept secretly, otherwise, she would be easily rejected. And so. She sighed and continued, perhaps you don't understand what I mean. The point I'm talking about isn't to prevent women from getting close to the furnace, but rather, the sword forging techniques of our Nameless Sword sect sword forgers have always been passed down to our own disciples. The consequence of doing so is that we won't be able to forge enough precious swords to supply the sword pool. Pan DN0VE1 COM, but who would believe me if I, little Yen Wei, said it out loud? With no other choice, I came up with the idea of blowing up the door. I wanted the sword forging hall to open its doors and accept new disciples so that those sword forgers could open their hearts and teach more disciples. This way, the sword light in the sword pool can be restored as soon as possible, and our Nameless Sword sect will prosper. Originally, I had planned to say these words that day, but the spiritual energy in my body suddenly fluctuated, so I had no choice but to return to my dormitory to cultivate in seclusion. That's why I showed up today. Forget it, I also know that my status is low, so no one will believe me even if I say these words. It's better to punish me. However, the patriarch once said that if the sword forging hall doesn't improve, he will still warn me. I don't know if he is trying to scare me. The crowd instantly exploded. One by one, they whispered and discussed animatedly. Many outer sect disciples had long been eyeing the sword forging technique with covetous eyes, and they were eager for the sect to teach them in public. Even if they could not become sword forging masters, they would still be treated much better as helpers than ordinary outer disciples. Naturally, they agreed with Hei Xinjia's words. Therefore, they argued, yes, junior sister Yun is right. The sword forging hall should open its doors and accept new members. If more people learn the sword forging arts, it will be a good thing for the anonymous sword sect. Now that you mention it, half of the sword auras were missing a few days ago for no reason. Maybe it was a warning from the founder, junior sister Yun is too kind. She would rather be punished to remind the sword forging hall to open its doors and accept new disciples. She is really our role model. No wonder Zichi's ears were bleeding. It turns out that she knows junior sister Yun was wronged. Yes, I used to speak ill of junior sister Yun in private. I am simply too inhuman. From now on, I am junior sister Yun's most staunch supporter. Manager Song, junior sister Yun is innocent. We request for junior sister Yun's release. Manager Song suddenly felt as if he had fallen into a pit. He felt that all of this was planned by this little girl in front of him. What kind of clever confession was this? It was all her way of showing off. The matter of the sword forging technique had always been debated within the sect. He did not know if this matter would be an opportunity. He himself hoped that the more disciples who knew the sword forging technique, the better. In that case, the sword light in the sword pool would recover as soon as possible, which would be a good thing for the cultivation of all the disciples. However, he also knew that most sword forging masters would definitely not agree to this matter. This was because the rarer something was, the more valuable it was. If there were more sword forging masters, their status would naturally be difficult to maintain. This was especially so for the sword forging masters of the lower house. Their sword forging skills were average and they were also the most vulnerable. They would definitely have objections. Just as Manager Song was in a daze, there was a commotion in the crowd. Manager Song looked up and saw the hall masters of the number 1 to number 8 sword forging hall. He thought to himself, the plaintiff is here. I'm afraid this matter cannot be resolved. The hall masters of the number 1 to number 8 sword forging hall heard that Yun Chujio had appeared, so they hurried over. Their purpose of coming here was naturally the same, and that was to punish Yun Chujio severely. This concerned the dignity of the sword forging hall. If Yun Chujio's punishment was not painful or itchy, then no one would take the sword forging hall seriously in the future. However, they came a little late after dealing with the matters at hand, but they still heard what Yun Chujio said later. All of them were so angry that their faces turned ashen. The thing that they hated the most in their lives was the public teaching of sword forging techniques. This was simply a threat to their status. Hall Master Yang of Sword Forging Hall No. 8, Shan Yanghu, was so angry that his goatee was raised. He squeezed to the front, he pointed at Yun Chujio and said, "Nonsense. This is simply nonsense. Sword forging techniques are the foundation of our nameless sword sect. How can we casually teach them?" Yun Chujio spread out her hands. "I'm just passing on the patriarch's meaning, you don't have to target me. Besides, what you said isn't right either. The foundation of our nameless sword sect is sword arts, and the sword forging technique is just a support. After all, without superb sword arts, what's the use of forging 10,000 swords? PN0V1 that's right. Does a little girl really think highly of herself? Let me tell you, our northern continent isn't like your southern continent. You little girl can be the female emperor of magnificence. In the northern continent, men are respected. You'd better confess honestly." Hall Master Lu from No. 2 Sword Forging Hall said disdainfully. Yun Chujio narrowed her eyes, she still had a faint smile on her face. I told you, I'm just a messenger. Anyway, the patriarch said that if you are stubborn, there will be a warning. We'll see when the time comes. The onlookers were all hoping that the sword forging art would be made public, so they naturally spoke up for Yun Chujio. Therefore, they all shouted, "Didn't the sword hut make some movements in the past few days? Maybe it's the patriarch's warning. What you said makes sense. First, the sword light in the sword pool was reduced by half, and then it was struck by lightning. These few days, the sword hut was reactivated again. Could all of this be a coincidence? It must be the forefathers' warning. They are all disciples of our nameless sword sect, but the gap between people is too big." Junior Sister Yun reminded everyone for the sake of the sect's safety, and some people lied for their own benefit. It's really disgraceful. The hall masters of the sword forging hall from No. 1 to No. 8 were so angry that they were about to vomit blood. They were really sitting at home, and trouble came from the sky. First, the gate was blown up, and now it became the target of the disciples' crusade. Who did they offend? Hall Master Luo of the Sword Forging Hall No. 1's eyes flashed, and he said to Yun Chujio, "Since you said that the patriarch will warn us, then we'll wait and see. If there is really a warning, then so be it. If there is no warning, then it is just your lies that confuse the masses. We will definitely ask the sect master to punish you severely and expel you from the sect." Yun Chujio laughed bitterly. Did you all see that? I told you that I should have just admitted my punishment. Now, you want to expel me from the sect just because of a disagreement? I'm really unlucky. The bystanders were filled with righteous indignation. Wasn't this obvious bullying? Junior sister Yun didn't say anything. She only conveyed the patriarch's intention. How did it become a bewitching rumor? Besides, what did junior sister Yun want? Wasn't it still for the sect's sake? Why did she want to expel her from the sect? Hall Master Luo was obviously more composed than the other 7. Most of the disciples present were outer disciples of the lower house. They couldn't cause any trouble at all. Moreover, the sword forgers in the sect would basically not agree to the matter of the sword forging technique being made public. When that time came, a few sword forgers would help speak up in front of sect master Ouyang, and this Yun Chujio would definitely be expelled from the sect. Just as Hall Master Luo was feeling pleased with himself. He heard Yun Chujio sigh faintly. Alright, since it has already come to this point, I can't refuse. Then let's see if the Patriarch will send a warning. I believe that the Patriarch will not play a trick on me. There will definitely be a warning, and it will definitely be related to the sword forging hall. Hall Master Luo and the others sneered. This Yun Chujio was really daring. They really wanted to see what the so-called warning was. Zhuge Dong was about to cry. How could this junior sister Yun always turn a small punishment into a disaster? Originally, she would receive some punishment and then go to the bitter cold cave for 3 months. This matter would be over, but she just had to say something about the sword forging technique being made public. Wasn't this just looking for trouble for herself? He didn't have any objections to this. Moreover, Hall Master Zhuge had also said in private that the sect should let more disciples with foundations learn the sword forging technique. This would be beneficial to the development of the sword forging technique. However, the vast majority of sword forging masters would not think so. Regardless of whether they succeeded or not, there would probably be more people who would resent junior sister Yun in their hearts. Moreover, what kind of ancestral master's teachings? Wasn't she just poisoned by a poisonous mushroom? Why would there be any warning? Zhuge Dong sighed non-stop. He had already informed Hall Master Zhuge of the news previously. However, he felt that there was no point in informing or not informing. Every time junior sister Yun got into trouble, it was not something that Hall Master could solve. Hall Master Yang rolled his eyes. Yun Chujio, there should be a time limit, right? How about 3 days? If nothing unusual happens within 3 days, we can go directly to the sect leader. 3 days? That's too long. Let's make it 6 hours. However, in order to prevent you and your disciples from concealing it, you can't use your identity jade token or voice transmission talisman. Don't tell me you don't dare to agree. Yun Chujio said indifferently. Hall Master Yang and the others were naturally eager for it. They sneered and said, why wouldn't we dare? Well, agree to it. Zhuge Dong sat on the ground. It was over. Junior sister Yun seemed to have gone into closed-door cultivation stupidly. If she could still think of a solution in 3 days, what could she do in 6 hours? Wasn't she courting death? At this time, Hall Master Zhuge squeezed out from the crowd. Just as he was about to help Yun Chujio plead, Hall Master Yang said with disdain, I say, where did this Yun Chujio have the guts to blow up the gates of our 8 sword forging halls? It turns out that you, Zhuge Zhongyuan, are the mastermind behind this. TSK, I heard that if you guys don't complete the mission this month, you will be kicked out of number 9 sword forging hall. So you instructed Yun Chujio to come here to divert our attention. You are really sinister. Chapter 3795 Hall Master Zhu of the number 7 forging hall also echoed with a fake smile. That's right, some people just refuse to accept reality, and even think that they are the Hall Master Zhuge from the past. Unfortunately, Now they have to resort to such a low-class method to protect the position of the hall master of the lower house's sword forging hall. It really makes people feel a little emotional. The other hall masters also followed suit and ridiculed Hall Master Zhuge. Hall Master Zhuge's thin and weak body was trembling in anger, but he was so angry that he could not speak, he just clenched his fists tightly. He Xinjiu could not stand to see the person she was protecting being bullied the most. Her small face darkened immediately. Some people have dirty hearts, but they think others are the same. How shameless. Stupid girl, say another word. Manager Song, you heard it too. This Yun Chuzhou publicly insulted the senior of the sect. According to the sect rules, shouldn't she be punished? Hall Master Zhu said angrily out of embarrassment. Yun Chuzhou spread her hands. Hall Master Zhu, I was talking about some people, not you. Why did you come to pick up the scolding yourself? Do you think that the characteristics I said are quite compatible with you? So you bravely came to pick up the scolding? Yun Chujia's words immediately made the disciples who were eating melon seeds burst into laughter. This Yun Chujia's words were really interesting, and there was nothing wrong with what she said. That's right, she didn't mention her name, but this Hall Master Zhu was stupid enough to go up and pick up the scolding, so stupid. Hall Master Zhu was so angry that he gnashed his teeth. Just as he was about to say something, Hall Master Luo stopped him. Hall Master Zhu, why do you have to argue with a little girl? When the 6 hours are up, there will naturally be some reasoning. Hall Master Zhu thought that it made sense. This stinky girl had a sharp tongue. He wouldn't be able to gain any advantage by arguing with her. In any case, when the 6 hours were up, this stinky girl would be expelled from the sect. There was no need for him to fight with her. Thus, Hall Master Zhu glared at Yun Chuzhou fiercely and didn't say anything. Hall Master Zhuge originally wanted to help Yun Chuzhou plead for mercy, but now he could only sigh deeply. In his heart, he thought that this little girl was really not well behaved. Why would she cause trouble every few days? Moreover, she specially picks trouble from the sky to provoke. She really knows how to be evil. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Time flew by quickly. Soon, nearly 2 hours had passed. Nothing had happened, and he had not heard of any abnormal situation in the sword forging hall. Hall Master Zhu and the others could not help but become even more complacent. A little girl still wanted to fight with them. She really overestimated herself. Hall Master Zhuge and Zhuge Dong looked very worried. On the other hand, Yun Chuzhou was leisurely chatting with the Shiji in the east. Little Dong Dong, thank you for helping me to seek justice. I knew you were the most fair and righteous beast. Little Dong Dong, do you think some people are so stupid? How can the patriarch's words be false? TSK, in a while, someone will regret it. Little Dong Dong, guess what kind of warning the patriarch will give? It can't be that he will make those 8 hall masters become women, right? Puchi. Everyone was tickled by Yun Chujia's words. This Yun Chuzhou was really a clown. Speaking of which, they really didn't want her to be expelled from the sect. Other things aside, ever since this Yun Chuzhou entered the sect, their dull sect life had become a lot more fun. At this moment, Hall Master Yang's identity jade token started to tremble. As he had said at first, Hall Master Yang could only ignore it, thinking that it was probably unimportant news. However, very soon, Hall Master Zhu and the others' identity jade tokens also started to tremble, and the voice transmission talisman in the storage ring also started to tremble non-stop. Hall Master Yang and the others, who were initially relaxed and proud, suddenly became a little bewildered. Why were their identity jade tokens and voice transmission talismans ringing at the same time? Could it be that something had happened in the sword forging hall? Although Hall Master Yang and the others wanted to know what exactly had happened right away, they had to console themselves first. It must be a coincidence, it must be a coincidence. Nothing would happen to the sword forging hall. Nothing would happen. A certain Jiu, who was chatting with Xie Ji, saw the situation and strolled over leisurely. Are you guys not confident now? I think it's most likely that the Patriarch has sent a warning. Now you don't have to say that I'm misleading people, right? Hall Master Yang snorted. It's just a coincidence. Don't be complacent. It's going to be 6 hours soon. Just wait to be expelled from the sect. Yun Chuzhou just chuckled and didn't argue. She just looked at the entrance of the square calmly. The disciples were all very excited. It seemed that something really happened. It seemed that what Yun Chuzhou said was true. But how would the Patriarch warn them? While everyone was discussing, a disciple rushed over. Someone recognized that person and exclaimed, "He's Lin Zhen from the number 8 sword forging hall." Did something happen to the number 8 sword forging hall? Hall Master Yang's heart was in his throat. Just as he was about to stop Lin Zhen from speaking, he saw Yun Chuzhou asking with a worried expression, "What happened to the number 8 sword forging hall?" "Senior brother, did something happen to the number 8 sword forging hall? Hurry up and say it so that everyone can help give advice." "Hall Master Yang, don't you think so?" Hall Master Yang was about to stop her, but he could only swallow his words. He squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth, "Say it." Lin Zhen felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. Didn't Hall Master say that he was going to severely punish Yun Chuzhou? Why did he see that Yun Chuzhou was alive and kicking, but the Hall Master's expression was so ugly instead? However, due to the urgency of the matter, Lin Zhen did not have the time to think too much. He said anxiously, "Hall Master, there's a problem with the earth fire. After breakfast, we originally planned to take out the iron block that was forged last night. We did not expect that only half of the ore inside had been refined. After some investigation, we found that even if we turn the earth fire switch to the maximum, the flame of the earth fire is only 1/10 of its original size. Moreover, the flame is very unstable, and there's no way to forge a sword." Lin Zhen's words immediately caused the crowd to explode. "Look, Yun Chuzhou is right. Isn't this a warning?" "That's right, the earth fire has always been very stable. How could there be a problem for no reason? Moreover, it happened at this time. Obviously, it's a warning from the Patriarch." "That's right. If it were anything else, it could be that someone deliberately played tricks. However, this earth fire is different from other things. Only those who are desperate would dare to have ideas about the earth fire." Pan DN0VE1 Xiaom Lin Zhen was confused. What warning from the Patriarch? What on earth had happened? Hall Master Yang's expression was very complicated. He was worried and angry. In short, it didn't look good. He said with a fierce expression, "It's just a sudden incident. Moreover, it's only our number 8 forging sword hall that has a problem with the earth fire. The other forging sword halls are doing as usual. It's not a warning at all." Hall Master Zhu echoed from the side, "That's right. It's just a coincidence. A problem of the forging sword hall doesn't mean anything unless all 8 of us have a problem." As soon as Hall Master Zhu finished his sentence, a few disciples rushed over. They were all disciples of the sword forging hall. "Hall Master, there's a problem with the earth fire. Hall Master, it's not good. For some reason, the earth fire has become very weak. Not to mention the sword forging hall, even the iron ore cannot be refined. Hall Master, something big has happened. The earth fire is flickering. It seems to be going out." The disciples of the sword forging hall all reported in fear. The content was basically the same. There was something wrong with the earth fire. Hall Master Zhu and the others' expressions were very interesting. Even if they were unwilling to admit it, they had no excuse at this time. This was because other than the forefathers' warning, they really could not explain why the earth fire of the 8 sword forging halls had gone out of control, Yun Chujio smiled faintly. This question is very easy to prove. Manager Song, you're the most impartial. Why don't you ask if there's any problem with the earth flames in the pill refining room? If there's no problem with the earth flames in the pill refining room, then Hall Master Luo has nothing to say, right? Seeing Yun Chujia's smile, Hall Master Luo felt a little flustered. He had an illusion that everything was arranged by this little girl in front of him. However, how could this be possible? The entrance to the earth fire was guarded by someone, and the earth fire pipeline was buried underground. She didn't have the ability to do anything. Could it really be the Patriarch's warning? Soon, Manager Song received a reply from the pill refining room. Everything was as usual and there was no problem. This time, Hall Master Luo and the others immediately became listless. No matter how unwilling they were in their hearts, they could only leave dejectedly. The disciples who were eating melon seeds immediately cheered, as if this was their victory. Manager Song wiped the cold sweat on his head. He always felt that this matter was so unbelievable. However, now that the plaintiff did not pursue the matter, he naturally would not be so stupid as to offend Yun Chujio. Yun Chujio, since the 8 hall masters have already let you go, you can go back now. Yun Chujio nodded and said a few polite words before leaving the discipline hall under the escort of the crowd. Hall Master Zhuge and Zhuge Dong followed behind the crowd with blank faces. They kept feeling that everything was like a dream. Only then did Zhuge Dong recall that the earth fire of their number 9 sword forging hall yesterday evening was also not quite normal. It was just that it was not as obvious as the other few. Could it really be a warning from the Patriarch? The news quickly spread to the higher-ups of the sect and Master Ouyang. Master Ouyang was dumbfounded. Eating a poisonous mushroom could not only create 3 sword moves, but it could also receive the warning from the Patriarch. Soon, a disciple in charge of managing the earth fire went to the forging sword hall in the lower house to check the situation. Unfortunately, he could not find out the reason. Moreover, he found that with the passage of time, the situation of the earth fire had actually begun to improve on its own. It was simply mysterious. Therefore, this matter became an unsolved case. They could only attribute it to the Patriarch's warning. Then, the problem came. Should they teach the sword forging technique to the public? The sect immediately fell into another argument. For a moment, it was extremely noisy. It was estimated that there would not be any conclusion in a short while. However, this matter made Yun Chujia's poisonous mushroom incident even more mysterious. It was to the extent that a few stupid disciples deliberately ate the poisonous mushroom to imitate it and almost lost their lives. Hei Xinjiu was very relaxed. She could not be bothered with these things. The forefather's warning was just a way for her to clear her name. As for the bleeding of Xie Zhi's ears, it was even easier. When she touched Xie Zhi's ears, she threw a few spiritual bees into his ears. The legs of those spiritual bees were stained with bright red flower juice. She just needed to get some from them according to her arrangement. Later, she went to talk to Xie Zhi and took the opportunity to put those spiritual bees back into the spiritual beast bag. As for the remaining flower juice in Xie Zhi's ears, it did not matter at all. After all, the matter was over. It did not matter whether Manager Song believed it or not. As long as he did not have any evidence against her, it was fine. The reason why this guy was deliberately mystifying was that she was not popular among the disciples to begin with. Moreover, the evidence of the explosion of the door was conclusive. If she did not make some gimmicks, who would listen to her? Moreover, with the evidence of Xie Zhi, her words were even more convincing. Because of this, the 8 sword forging halls naturally could not complete the mission. Even Hall Master Zhuge and the others felt much more relaxed. Since they could not complete the mission, they did not have to worry about being punished. Moreover, now that the sword forging hall was in the middle of a storm, the sword pool naturally did not dare to publicly make things difficult for the number 9 sword forging hall at this time, for fear of causing any more trouble. Therefore, the atmosphere in the number 9 forging sword hall was very relaxed recently, and even Hall Master Zuja's temper was a little better than before. Yun Chujio was also too lazy to compete with him. After a few days in the sword hut, this fellow felt that the time-consuming and laborious task of forging swords should be left to those foolish men. As for the matter of infusing sword intent, she decided to settle down for a period of time. Perhaps one day, she would be able to figure out the key to success. Yun Chujio pondered over it for a few days. She felt that in order to achieve the goal of isolating or even destroying the 9 pavilions, the most important thing was to raise her status. She was only a small handyman now and didn't have any say at all. The only reason she was able to meet Master Ouyang and the others was because she was once the female emperor of Zephyr. Otherwise, a small piece of trash like her wouldn't even be able to meet an elder. After inquiring about the situation, this fellow decided to think of a way to become an outer sect disciple first, and then plan step by step. There was only one way for a handyman of the Nameless Sword sect to become an outer sect disciple, and that was to earn enough sect contribution points. As for the way to earn sect contribution points, that was to accept missions. Every mission completed would earn the corresponding sect contribution points. Yun Chujio could not help but curse in her heart. The Nameless Sword sect's calculations were really shrewd. With such an assessment method, the servants would naturally work for the sect without regrets. Most importantly, it was very difficult to earn sect contribution points. And to become an outer disciple, one had to earn at least 5,000 contribution points. Some servants could not earn 5,000 contribution points even after decades of time. After Yun Chujio asked around, she decided to go to the bounty hall of the lower house to see if there were any suitable missions. Very soon, Yun Chujio arrived at the bounty hall of the lower house. It was filled with odd job workers who came to accept missions. Because some missions were more popular, they were very noisy. Yun Chujio frowned and then looked at the bulletin board. The missions on it were nothing more than running errands, planting, picking, and hunting demon beasts. The corresponding contribution points were also pitifully small, at most, it was only 5 contribution points. Hei Shinjo counted with her fingers. 5 contribution points per mission. Wouldn't it take 1,000 missions to accumulate 5,000 contribution points? This was too slow. If she accepted these missions step by step, it wouldn't be reliable at all. She had to think of other ways. This guy was never a person who followed the rules. He blinked his eyes and was thinking of a way when a weak voice came from the side. Yun, junior sister Yun, you are also here to accept missions. So it's senior brother Lu. Not bad, I am here to accept a mission, but I haven't seen a suitable one, Yun Chujio said with a smile. The servant in front of her could be considered as an old acquaintance of Yun Chujio. It was the servant who delivered meals to Yun Chujio every now and then, Lu Liang. Lu Liang had always been ostracized in the canteen. Otherwise, he would not have been pushed out to deliver meals to the number 9 sword forging hall. However, ever since he took on this task, his days in the canteen had been a little better. After all, no one was willing to take on this task, so he did not make things difficult for him. Therefore, Lu Liang was still somewhat grateful to Yun Chujio in his heart. Moreover, he was quite envious of Yun Chujio's willful personality. That was why he had the courage to come over and greet her. Seeing that Yun Chujio's attitude was quite kind, Lu Liang became a little more daring. I wonder what kind of mission junior sister Yun is looking for. I am quite familiar with these missions. I can help you introduce them. The corners of Yun Chujio's mouth curled up. There are many contribution points. Are there any that can earn hundreds or thousands of contribution points in one go? Lu Liang, at this moment, he only had one thought in his mind. He should not have picked a fight with this little pervert. A few hundred contribution points. Why didn't she rob him? Seeing that Lu Liang did not speak, Yun Chujiu knew that there was an 80% chance that it was impossible. Could it be that she could only earn 5 contribution points? At this moment, a male voice said, "Junior sister Yun, do you want to earn more contribution points? It's not impossible to earn a few hundred contribution points. You can even earn 1,000 contribution points in one go." Yun Chujiu turned her head and saw that the disciple who spoke was very unfamiliar. However, he was wearing the uniform of a handyman, so he should also be a handyman. When the male voice saw Yun Chujiu looking at him, he continued to say politely, "Junior sister Yun, you may not know me. I am also a disciple of the lower house. However, I am usually in charge of cleaning in the sword hall of the lower house, so you may not have seen me before." Sword hall of the lower house. Yun Chujiu could not help but raise her guard. Previously, Uncle Master Wan and Luo Hai and Yu Bo did not avoid talking in the sword hall. It was obvious that most of the people in the sword hall of the lower house were Elder Wan's people. This man with the croaky voice probably had bad intentions. "Oh. May I know how to address this senior brother? What is the matter with the few hundred contribution points you mentioned just now?" Yun Chujiu asked with a faint smile. "Im Jiarini. Junior sister Yun can just call me senior brother Jiao. The mission board is filled with missions that are not difficult. The missions with high contribution points are on the second floor. Junior sister Yun can consult the manager." The smile on Yun Chujiu's face deepened. Senior brother Jia's character is indeed the same as his name. "Thank you very much." After Yun Chujiu finished speaking, she turned around and walked towards the manager's office of the bounty hall. Lu Liang thought for a moment and followed after her. Jiarini first curled his lips in disdain, then his expression became a little ugly. Was it the same as his name? Was Yun Chujiu talking about benevolence or false benevolence? "Junior sister Yun, I heard that the mission on the second floor is very dangerous. If none of the servants who accepted the mission on the second floor come back alive, don't take the risk. Moreover, I heard that Jiarini is not a good person." "I'm afraid he doesn't have any good intentions," Lu Liang said in a low voice. Yun Chujiu said indifferently, "Thank you for your reminder, senior brother Lu. I'll go up and take a look first. If it doesn't work, then I won't accept it." Lu Liang shook his head. He didn't want anything to happen to Yun Chujiu. After all, if something happened to this little pervert, his situation in the canteen would probably be difficult again. Therefore, he decided to go up to the second floor to take a look as well and think of a way to stop Yun Chujiu from accepting the mission on the second floor. Yun Chujiu and the manager of the bounty hall said that they wanted to go up to the second floor to take a look. The manager glanced at Yun Chujiu a few times. If other odd job workers had made this request, he would definitely sneer at them. However, when he thought of a certain Zhou's glorious history, he quickly opened the entrance to the second floor. Yun Chujiu hopped up to the second floor, and Lu Liang followed her up to the second floor. As expected, there were no other servants on the second floor except for the manager who was in charge of registration. The manager glanced at Yun Chujiu and Lu Liang with a disdainful look in his eyes. He was certain that they did not dare to accept the mission on the bulletin board. Yun Chujiu's eyes were sparkling, and she was overjoyed. TSK, the missions on the second floor are still better. I can get 5,000 contribution points just by accepting a few missions. That's great. Yun Chujiu said excitedly. Lu Liang was speechless. You only saw the contribution points at the back, but look at those abnormal missions at the front. Not to mention the odd job workers, even inner disciples might not be able to complete these missions. Otherwise, how could there be so many contribution points? However, these missions were more time-consuming, laborious, and dangerous. Therefore, they were eliminated from the middle and upper house missions to the lower house. Yun Chuzhou naturally knew that these missions were not easy to complete, but this was what made it challenging. She stared at the bulletin board for a while, and finally walked to the steward and said, "I accepted the 9th mission, which is to go to the Myriad Bone Mountain to find Emo Zhuoshi." Lu Liang sat on the ground. Among all the missions, going to the Myriad Bone Mountain to find Emo Zhuoshi was the most contribution points. It was a total of 1,000 contribution points, but it was also the most dangerous. Not to mention Yun Chuzhou, who was only a small handyman in the 9th level of the spirit transformation realm. Even inner sect disciples who went to Mount Wangu had to team up before they dared to go in. Moreover, there was no guarantee that they would be able to come out unscathed. Wasn't she courting death? The manager in charge of the registration also had a dull look on his face. He thought that he had heard wrongly and asked with some uncertainty, "You said that you are going to take the mission to Mount Wangu to look for Emo Zhuoshi?" Yun Chuzhou nodded with certainty and handed over the identity jade token. "Please help me register." The manager endured it and said, "Mount Wangu is very dangerous and Emo Zhuoshi is hard to find." "Are you sure?" Yun Chuzhou nodded again. "Thank you for the reminder, but I still want to try." Seeing that Yun Chuzhou was determined, Manager Ming could only shake his head. Then, he took Yun Chuzhou's identity jade token and began to register. Yun Chuzhou said to Lu Liang beside her, "Senior brother Lu, why don't we go together?" Lu Liang shook his head like a rattledrum. He didn't want to die. He was basically certain that he would soon return to the days of being bullied because Yun Chuzhou was dead for sure. After the steward finished registering, he handed Yun Chuzhou a token to enter the sect. Only then did Yun Chuzhou and Lu Liang go down to the 2nd floor. Jiarini immediately came up and asked eagerly, "Junior sister Yun, I didn't lie to you, did I? Is the mission on the 2nd floor full of contribution points?" Yun Chuzhou smiled and nodded. "Thank you, senior brother Jia. I accepted the mission to look for Emo Zhuoshi on Mount Wangu. When I become an outer disciple, I will definitely thank you properly." Jiarini was also stunned when he heard that Yun Chuzhou had accepted the mission to look for Emo Zhuoshi at the Myriad Bone Mountain. He thought that Yun Chuzhou would at most accept a mission of 100 contribution points. He did not expect that Yun Chuzhou would actually seek death by accepting the mission to look for Emo Zhuoshi at the Myriad Bone Mountain. Wasn't she seeking her own death? However, his smile quickly changed. He pretended to be polite for a while before he left in a hurry. Yun Chuzhou sneered in her heart. She naturally knew what Jiarini had gone to do. It was nothing more than to send a message and take credit for it. Lu Liang tried to persuade Yun Chuzhou again, wanting to rein her in. In the end, when he saw that Yun Chuzhou had made up her mind, he could only leave dejectedly. PN0VE1 Therefore, Yun Chuzhou only sent a message to Zhuge Dong when she arrived at the gate of the sect. Then, she swaggered out of the mountain gate. Yun Chuzhou summoned her flying spirit tool and quickly disappeared without a trace. On the other side, after Elder Wan received the news, his heart was instantly filled with joy. There were many misgivings in the sect if he wanted to make a move, but once that wretched girl left the sect, there was only death awaiting her. Elder Wan immediately arranged for people to go to the Myriad Bone Mountain to chase after Yun Chuzhou. He was determined to kill Yun Chuzhou with his life. Not only that, the 9-layered pavilion also received the news that Tower Master Luochen had personally led people to the Myriad Bone Mountain to capture Yun Chuzhou. After all, if Yun Chuzhou was in the sect, he would not be able to make a move due to the reputation of the Nameless Sword sect. Unfortunately, these people waited until the seas dried up and the rocks turned rotten, but they still did not see He Xinjiu. Not only that, the two sides even fought due to suspicions and misunderstandings. The people sent by Elder Wan were no match for the 9 pavilions. More than half of them were dead or injured, and they fled back in a sorry state. When Elder Wan received the news, he nearly vomited blood. Could that damned Yun Chuzhou know the invisibility spell? They had set up an inescapable net, so how could they not find her whereabouts? Actually, the reason was very simple. Hei Shinjo did not go to the bullshit Myriad Bone Mountain at all. At this moment, a certain Jiao who had already taken the transfiguration pill was strolling around the city near the nameless sword sect. It was simply too carefree. This fellow was so smart. How could he be so stupid as to really go to the Myriad Bone Mountain to be a live target? He was just fooling around with those people. As for Emojusher, Hei Shinjo had a lot of it in her storage ring. They were all stolen from Xiao Hei's cave abode back then. When the time came, she could just casually get a few pieces to hand over to them. After Hei Shinjo had enough of showing off outside, she bought a bunch of food and a bunch of random things before returning to the Nameless Sword sect. The news that Yun Chujo had accepted Emojusher's mission had already spread throughout the lower house. Therefore, when everyone saw that Yun Chujo had returned safely, they were all dumbfounded. Initially, they thought that Yun Chujo would definitely die in the Myriad Bone Mountain. Who would have thought that not only did she return alive and kicking, she was also in high spirits. It was not like she had escaped death, but it was more like she had gone somewhere to have fun. However, everyone soon felt that they had guessed the truth. Perhaps Yun Chujo would regret it after accepting the mission and did not go to the Myriad Bone Mountain at all. She only went out for a stroll. That's right, junior sister Yun. Just tell us the truth. We won't laugh at you. Young people are really ambitious. After suffering a few more setbacks, they will know what it means to be extremely ambitious. Yun Chujo only smiled and did not say anything. She strolled towards the bounty hall. When everyone saw that Yun Chujo did not respond, they thought that Yun Chujo was too ashamed to tell the truth. They all followed behind her and were ready to laugh at Yun Chujio's misfortune. Lu Liang was overjoyed when he heard the news of Yun Chujio's return. He did not care whether Yun Chujo found Emojusher or not, as long as this little pervert came back. Thus, he rushed to the bounty hall. Junior sister Yun, you're back. That's great. It doesn't matter if you didn't find Emojusher. Hurry up and return the jade token to the manager. Then, take on a suitable mission on the first floor. I think a mission to look after the herbs would be good. Lu Liang could not stop babbling, perhaps because he was too excited. Yun Chujo glanced at him and was about to go up to the second floor to hand in the mission. Unexpectedly, the manager on the first floor said, "Just hand over the jade token to me. There's no need to go up to the second floor." When the manager on the first floor said this, his tone was quite contemptuous. He knew that this Yun Chujo would never be able to complete the mission on the second floor. Yun Chujo seemed to not notice his contempt. She walked to him with a smile and took out a piece of Inkshua stone and placed it on the table. Boom! The crowd immediately exploded. Oh my god, this Yun Chujo actually found the Inkshua stone. And it completely fits the size of the requirements. I got 1,000 contribution points. The steward was also very surprised. He paused and said, "Congratulations, you have successfully completed the mission. Pass me the identity jade token, and I will help you record the contribution points." Yun Chujo smiled slightly, "No rush. I want to ask, is one piece of black Shua stone worth 1,000 contribution points? If I have 5 pieces, can you give me 5,000 contribution points directly?" The steward was stunned at first, then, he sneered. "Of course, but don't be too greedy. The ink stone is different from other minerals. It's scattered. Not to mention 5 pieces, even finding 2 pieces at once is an extremely difficult thing." The onlookers also pursed their lips. This Yun Chujo was too complacent. She was already burning incense after finding 1 piece, why would she dream of having 5 pieces? This was simply nonsense. Just as everyone was discussing, Yun Chujo took out an inkstone and placed it on the table. Before everyone could cry out in surprise, another inkstone was placed on the table. Everyone looked at the 5 ink stones on the table in silence. Did Yun Chujio really find 5 ink stones? Many people even rubbed their eyes. They felt that everything in front of them was so unreal, as if they were dreaming. The manager was also stunned. Did she really find 5 inkshua stones? What did 5 inkshua stones mean? That was 5,000 contribution points. Wouldn't Yun Chujio be directly converted to an outer disciple? The steward was stunned for a while before transferring the 5,000 contribution points to Yun Chujio's identity jade token. Then, he said dryly, "Go to the miscellaneous affairs hall to handle the following procedures." Yun Chujio thanked the steward politely and then walked out of the bounty hall unhurriedly. The disciples looked at Yun Chujio's back with envy and jealousy. Yun Chujio's luck was too good, wasn't it? She went out and not only did she not die, she even got 5 pieces of black shua stones. How many odd job workers had not collected 5,000 contribution points in decades? Yun Chujio just went out for a walk and collected enough. Yun Chujio had only entered the sect for a total of 2 months, right? She had actually become an outer disciple so easily. Lu Liang was even more regretful and wanted to bang his head against the wall. If he had known earlier, he would have agreed to go to Mount Wangu with Yun Chujio. It was too late to say anything now. After Yun Chujio became an outer disciple, she would definitely not stay in the number 9 sword forging hall anymore. Then, wouldn't his future days be miserable again? Yun Chujio happily went to the odd job hall and placed the identity jade token in front of Manager Yu. "Manager Yu, help me to handle the procedures for the identity conversion." Manager Yu was confused. He was a little confused when he saw Yun Chujio appear in front of him. Didn't she go to Mount Wangu to die? Why did she come back? Also, what identity change? Yun Chujio, what identity change did you say? Do you have a document? Yun Chujio frowned. Document? The bounty hall didn't give me a document. Didn't they say that a sect can be converted to an outer sect disciple after reaching 5,000 contribution points? What document? Manager Yu opened his mouth wide. You mean you've earned 5,000 contribution points? Yun Chujio didn't say anything. She just handed over the identity jade token in her hand. After Manager Yu looked at the contribution points inside, he was dumbfounded. This Yun Chujio should be the handyman who turned into an outer disciple at the fastest speed in the history of the Nameless Sword sect, right? Manager Yu finally calmed down with great difficulty and then began to help Yun Chujio with the relevant procedures. The treatment of outer disciples was much better than that of handymen. Not only did they not have to work, but they could also receive a certain amount of sect supplies every month. They could also enter the lower house's sword hall to learn sword techniques. Manager Yu then pointed to a notice board at the side and said, "The red dot on it is already full of people. You can choose any of the remaining green dots." Full of people? Do you mean that there are several people living in each courtyard? Yun Chujio asked, puzzled. 4 outer sect disciples share a courtyard, but the rooms are independent. It's not bad. Manager Yu was quite patient with Yun Chujio. PN0V1 there's no one with their own house. Even if the location is slightly off, it's fine if the conditions are slightly worse. Manager Yu shook his head. If you want a house with only one house, you'll have to become an inner disciple. Outer disciples don't have this kind of treatment. Yun Chujio couldn't help but curse in her heart. The Nameless Sword sect was such a big place, yet they were so stingy. Can't they build a few more courtyards? Yun Chujio was about to tell Manager Yu that she might as well just stay in sword forging hall number 9. She didn't expect someone to come over and say, "Manager Yu, it's not like there's no separate courtyard. Have you forgotten that place?" The one who spoke was a disciple of the miscellaneous affairs hall. After hearing his words, Manager Yu frowned. Aren't outer sect disciples supposed to have 4 people in a courtyard? Where is there a separate courtyard? The disciple pointed at a corner on the bulletin board. Manager Yu, have you forgotten that there's another courtyard here? Manager Yu followed the direction of the disciple's finger and frowned even more. Nonsense. It's not like you don't know that there's something strange about that courtyard. It's been abandoned for many years. How can there be people living there? That's because the people who live there are all ordinary people. If a genius like Junior Sister Yun were to live there, perhaps nothing would happen. Junior Sister Yun, don't tell me you don't dare to try. The disciple said with a slightly provocative tone. Yun Chujio smiled faintly. Why wouldn't I dare? Manager Yu, then he'll live in that courtyard. Manager Yu was about to persuade her, but coincidentally, someone came to look for Manager Yu to talk about something else. The disciple received Yun Chujio's jade token attentively and helped her with the formalities. Junior Sister Yun, when you arrive at the courtyard, you can use your identity jade token to open the restriction of the courtyard. In addition, unless you become an inner disciple, you can't change the courtyard. When the disciple said the last sentence, he seemed to be gloating. Got it. Thank you for the reminder, senior brother. Yun Chujio glanced at the disciple with a slightly cold gaze. Another person had appeared on the black ledger in her heart. The disciple could not help but feel a little guilty. He had thought that Yun Chujio would find fault with him, but he did not expect Yun Chujio to leave so slowly. After Manager Yu finished dealing with the matters on the other side, he saw a green dot at the corner of the bulletin board. He glared at the disciple and sighed in his heart. Yun Chujio lived in such a courtyard. She should seek her own fortune. Yun Chujio did not go directly to her new residence. Instead, she first went to number 9 Sword Forging Hall. Hall Master Zhuge and Dongxi were very happy for Yun Chujio when they learned that Yun Chujio had become an outer disciple. After all, the treatment of outer disciples was much better than that of laborers. Zhuge Bei said with some reluctance, Junior Sister Yun, are you going to move out in the future? You must remember to come back and visit us often. Zhuge Dong also smiled and said, it's good to move out. When the time comes, 4 female disciples will be living in a courtyard. Junior Sister Yun will be able to make more friends. Zhuge Bei curled his lips. What's good about that? Who knows what the character of the 3 people who live together is like? Junior Sister Yun is so pure and kind, she will be bullied. Zhuge Dong, he really wanted to ask Zhuge Bei, are you blind? This little pervert is still so pure and kind. Pan DN0V1 COMA Private Courtyard. Hall Master Zhuge and the north, south, east, and west were all stunned. Everyone knew that the outer disciples were all 4 people in a room. How could Yun Chujio be assigned to a private courtyard's dormitory? Yun Chujio told them everything that had happened. She pointed at a place on the map and said, here, it's here. Hall Master Zhuge's expression immediately changed. Nonsense. You can't live here at all. That disciple of the Miscellaneous Affairs Hall is obviously trying to trick you. You don't have to move anymore. You should still live here. East, west, south, and north didn't look too good either. Zhuge Dong sighed. Junior Sister Yun, you're usually quite smart. Why did you fall for it so easily this time? Yun Chujio blinked her eyes and asked, Senior Brother Dong, what's wrong with this courtyard? This courtyard is a famous haunted house in the Nameless Sword sect. Any disciple who stays there for less than a month will definitely suffer from qi deviation. In the beginning, many people did not believe it, but those who went in without exception suffered from qi deviation. As time passed, this courtyard remained empty. So, Junior Sister Yun, you should still stay here. Don't move in. Zhuge Dong said with a serious expression. Unfortunately, after Zhuge Dong finished speaking, he didn't see any fear on Yun Chujio's face. Instead, that little pervert's eyes were sparkling with interest. PN0VE1 After Hei Shinjo said that, she ran out of number 9 sword forging hall, ignoring the shouts of Hall Master Zhuge. Hall Master Zhuge was so angry that he gritted his teeth. This little girl was too ridiculous. Hall Master, you don't have to worry too much. That courtyard hasn't been occupied for a long time. It must be very dilapidated. Junior sister Yun might regret it after seeing it, Zhuge Dong comforted him. Hall Master Zhuge felt that what he said made sense. That little girl was just curious. Perhaps she would back out after knowing the difficulty. Hei Shinjo hopped towards her new residence as she pondered in her heart. Qi deviation. She wanted to see what exactly caused it. The reason why this fellow was so confident was because she had the black pearl. All kinds of mental demons were like floating clouds in front of her. Yun Chujia's courtyard was in the northernmost part of the outer sect disciples' dormitory district. Furthermore, it was still some distance away from the dormitory district. It stood there alone. Some of the outer sect disciples who had received the news looked at Yun Chujio from afar. Their mouths twitched. This Yun Chujio was really stupid. She actually chose that famous haunted house. Wasn't she looking for trouble? It wouldn't be long before this Yun Chujio would go crazy. Yun Chujio naturally didn't take the discussions of these people to heart. She went to the entrance of the courtyard and used her identity jade token to open the restriction. Then, she pushed open the courtyard door. The courtyard was a barren scene. There were weeds all over the ground. Even the roof had weeds growing on it. It seemed that no one had lived there for a long time. Yun Chujio closed the courtyard door and opened the restriction again. Then, she let out puppet number 4 and puppet number 5 to clear the weeds on the ground. She jumped onto the roof and began to clear the weeds on the roof. Soon, the weeds on the courtyard and the roof were cleared. Yun Chujio squatted on the roof and looked at the small courtyard. She felt that it was not bad. There were 4 rooms in total, and the yard was quite spacious. Even if the pretty boy came with black chicken head and the little lunatic, it would be enough to live in. The most important thing was that there were no other dormitories around. It was very private, so she felt more at ease living in it. Yun Chujio tidied up the 4 rooms again. Although the furniture inside had fallen a lot of dust, it was still good after it was wiped clean. After such a busy meal, the sky was already dark. Yun Chujio casually ate something and then let Buttface out. Buttface had a good meal in the yard and then went into Yun Chujio's bedroom. "Little fairy, why do you think those people went mad?" Before Yun Chujio could answer, Buttface continued, "But, little fairy, you definitely won't go mad because your heart is black. You have been a little devil for a long time. Yun Chujio, get lost." Chapter 3806, Fear of Ghosts. Buttface. Yun Chujio taught Buttface a lesson and then ordered him to keep watch while she lay comfortably on the bed and fell asleep. First, Buttface dutifully checked the yard and found nothing unusual. Then, he lay down beside Yun Chujio's bed and began to chew on the bones happily. This guy was most likely born with the shell of a dog, so his habits became more and more like a dog. He liked to chew on the bones whenever he had nothing to do. In the middle of the night, Yun Chujio was sleeping soundly when there was a knock on the door. Before Buttface could react, Yun Chujio shouted with a face full of killing intent, "Who is it? Is there something wrong with you? Why are you knocking on the door in the middle of the night? Get lost." The knocking on the door suddenly stopped as if nothing had happened. Buttface was also shocked by a certain Joe's shout. He thought to himself that he had to learn a lesson in the future. He must not disturb this little demon's sleep. This little demon was too angry when he woke up. Buttface originally wanted to go out and check, but he was afraid that he would wake Yun Chujio up. In the end, he laid on the ground and did not move. This time, nothing unusual happened until the sky was bright. Yun Chuzhou was awakened by the vibration of the identity jade plate. She unhappily probed her spiritual sense and found that it was a message from Zhuge Dong. It was nothing more than to confirm her condition. Yun Chuzhou endured her anger and replied a few words. Then, she lay on the bed like a little bastard and continued to sleep. It was not until noon that He Xinjiu stretched herself and got out of bed. But Face flattered her, "Little fairy, you are even more beautiful today than yesterday. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site." Thanks. Yun Chuzhou glanced at him and slowly washed up. Then, she opened the courtyard door with butt face. She wanted to see who was knocking on the door in the middle of the night. When she arrived at the courtyard door, she saw that there were no footprints of other people or demon beasts other than her own footprints yesterday. Butt face covered his mouth with his paw. "Little fairy, it must be a ghost." "It's a ghost. I'm so scared." Yun Chuzhou sneered. "If only it's really a ghost. I can catch a few to play with." Butt face could not help but shiver. Damn, this little demon was not human at all. She actually wanted to catch a ghost to play with. It scared the baby to death. Yun Chuzhou looked at Butt face with disdain. Was this coward an ancient fierce beast? It was so hilarious. "Butt face, what's the difference between a ghost and a remnant soul? If you're not afraid of a remnant soul, why are you afraid of a ghost?" Butt face shivered. How? How is that the same? A remnant soul can't float outside, but a ghost can. Moreover, ghosts don't make any sound when they walk. They float and float. It's so scary. The ghosts that float out are all resentful. They strangle people's necks whenever they want. Woo woo, how terrifying. Yun Chuzhou really couldn't be bothered with this idiot. Wasn't he just a drifter? What was there to be afraid of? The most terrifying thing in this world wasn't any demons or ghosts, but the human heart. After Yun Chuzhou turned around, a cunning look flashed across Butt face's eyes. The little girl was still too inexperienced. She didn't even know that the ghosts it was talking about weren't ghosts, but the ghost race. That was a terrifying clan. When Dog 2 thought of this, its whole body trembled again. It hurriedly chased after Yun Chuzhou. Yun Chuzhou had a simple breakfast. Originally, she wanted to leave Dog 2 in the yard to look after the house. However, Dog 2 cried so much that it didn't leave any tears behind. Yun Chuzhou had no choice but to put it into the spirit beast bag. Chapter 3807, Receiving the Sex Resources. Yun Chuzhou was speechless at Butt face. Why was this idiot getting more and more cowardly? Yun Chuzhou left the courtyard and was about to go to Sword Forging Hall No. 9 for a stroll when she unexpectedly met Zhuge Dong on the way. Although Zhuge Dong had communicated with Yun Chuzhou in the morning, he still wanted to see with his own eyes. Now that he saw that Yun Chuzhou was alive and kicking, he was relieved. "Junior sister Yun, it just so happens that today is the first day of the Lunar New Year. Let's go, they'll bring you to collect the sex resources for the outer sect disciples." Yun Chuzhou had heard Zhuge Bei mutter that because they had not completed their mission, the sex resources were always withheld. She was really curious about what the so-called sex resources were. Thus, Yun Chuzhou followed Zhuge Dong to the miscellaneous office. Very quickly, Yun Chuzhou received her own sex resources. It turned out to be 2 bottles of pills. The label on the bottle said that it was a 9 transformation spirit pill. Yun Chuzhou knew that this 9 transformation spirit pill was a level 27 pill. Although she had never refined it, she did not think that it was anything precious. This guy muttered softly, "I thought it was something good, but there are only these 2 bottles of broken things." The corner of Zhuge Dong's eyes twitched violently. Broken things. The outer disciples were about to break their heads because of the 9 revolution spirit gathering pill. It was only then that Yun Chujio noticed that Zhuge Dong did not receive the sect's supplies. She asked curiously, "Senior brother Dong, why aren't you going to receive them? The sect's supplies for our sword forging hall's disciples are not collected at the General Affairs Office, but at the stewarding hall of the sword pool." Zhuge Dong was a little apprehensive. He did not know if the sect's supplies would be distributed in full this month. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Ever since the big kitchen knife swallowed half of the sword light, He Xinjiu did not dare to go near the sword pool because of her guilty conscience. After hearing Zhuge Dong's words, she thought it would be good to go to the edge of the sword pool to repent. Therefore, this guy accompanied Zhuge Dong to the sword pool. Zhuge Dong went in to collect the sect's resources, while He Xinjiu went to the sword pool at the side. This guy looked at the sword pool that was no longer as glorious as before, and his conscience was a little painful. He estimated that if he wanted to restore the sword pool to its previous appearance, he would have to throw at least 100,000 swords into it. It was all because of that greedy big kitchen knife. While Yun Chujio was repenting by the side of the sword pool, Zhuge Dong came over with an unsightly expression and called for her to leave. Yun Chujio caught a glimpse of Zhuge Dong's expression and asked in puzzlement, "Senior brother Dong, what happened?" Zhuge Dong said with some anger, "The stewarding hall of the sword pool has deducted more than half of our sect's resources again. It's really going too far." Yun Chujio frowned. "Why did they deduct your sect's resources? Didn't they not complete the mission last month?" "They said that the other sword forging hall didn't complete the mission because there was a problem with the earth fire, but there was no problem with the earth fire of our number 9 sword forging hall, so they had to deduct the sect's resources." "Senior brother Dong, can't you tell them that the other sword forging hall has several more disciples than our number 9 sword forging hall?" Zhuge Dong smiled bitterly. "Of course I did. However, the steward said that if they didn't consider the fact that our number 9 forging sword hall has fewer people, they would have kicked us out of the number 9 forging sword hall." Yun Chujio narrowed her eyes. She was a little angry. However, she thought that it was not a big deal to just confiscate some of the sect's resources. Moreover, Hall Master Zhuge and the 5 steamed buns did not resist, she did not have to fight with them. Therefore, she did not say anything and prepared to leave the sword pool with Zhuge Dong and go to the number 9 sword forging hall to see the others. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.